There's a question that we get here often on UGAsports.com. I even get it, and I'm not associated with Pro Football Focus, but Brent Rollins is. I'm Dayne Young. This is Film Don't Lie from UGAsports.com. Brent, what's that question? Because I'm sure you get it constantly.
Why is the grade what it is? I mean, it's just, why is the number? Why is it a 75 versus a 82? Why is it a 54 versus a 61? It's a massive topic of conversation, both in college and the NFL, probably more so in the NFL because a little more people pay attention to it. But at least with what we do at UGAsports.com and the dog vent, it's always a topic of conversation.
Ignore my shoddy producing where I left our Tuesday podcast background here. And now I just fixed it. No one else noticed. I could have just left it be, not drawn attention to it, but that's not what we do. We're combining that question you get often about how does PFF come up with the grades that it does. We're combining that with the celebration of Georgia's perfect season, the second of back-to-back national championships. Because, look, yes, you turn the page in the 2023 season, that story begins to be written soon. But I still think there's a lot to be rehashed from the 2022 season and kind of remember how special it was. So what we're going to do on this episode of Film Don't Lie is look at, it's 11 of the highest graded plays for Georgia's season. So what does that mean? You told me, hey, we have a scale for how this gets calculated. So tell me what we're looking at here because this is important for Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, so this is on the PFF website. Like if you really look into how player grades are calculated and what comes into gets into that sort of 79.6, all of it is a play-by-play. So what you see here is a raw scoring that is done on every single play for every player. So for UGA this past season, that's 2,513 snaps because that's inclusive of offense, defense, special teams, plays where there was a penalty. Everything was inclusive there. So obviously there's 11 players in the field on each play. So you're talking over 24,000 possible individual grades for each of those 2,500 plays. And what we've done is we've basically highlighted the ones that on the far right of the scale, the plus 1.5s, the plus 2. There was only one that actually existed that wasn't, and it was a punt. So that we didn't really highlight this one, highlight that one. But we're looking at basically the highest end of the scale in terms of grade. And then obviously the more of those you have, the more impact plays you make. And these are difference-making plays. And the biggest key with this is that, like, for example, Jalen Carter led the Bulldogs this past year with 6 at the 1.5 mark, 6 plays that were graded out at that. It doesn't necessarily always translate into the one we're going to show, which ends up being a sack. It's oftentimes a play that it's just the extra individual effort, game situation, all the things that go into that. And especially with pass rushers and defenders, winning quickly, like winning really quickly, instantly beating your defender, things like that, because it's a lot of it. It's individual. It's a production grade. It's very focused on what the individual does. And then obviously, you play 30 plays, you get the interesting thing about it is oftentimes it ends up in the 0 mark. Like 87% of Georgia plays, of the snaps that were counted, right on the 0 mark, where it's, hey, you kind of did your job, but you didn't do anything extraordinary, you didn't do anything negative. That's where most of the plays end up being.
So do I understand it that the one Georgia play that was a plus 2 on this scale was a Thorson punt?
Yes, that is. And punting is unique because there's so many things that go into it. That we detailed that when we looked at his punt in the Tennessee game. But it's hang time, it's location, it's distance. There's factors that go into that. But, in terms of, we didn't, like, for example, Ringo last year's pick 6. Plus 2, like that's where you're getting into the sort of magnitude of plays that get you into that realm.
Well, Aussie, oi, oi. I love that. But then also my best friend is a Chargers fan. So anytime that I get to show him that Eli Manning did something amazing, I love that too, because Chargers people do not like Eli Manning at all.
Because for saying that he didn't want to play there.
Yeah. And, worked out for him because what's funny about this is that, like, it's like this great throw from Eli Manning in the Super Bowl, but the one that everyone thinks of is just the, like, throw it up there and the guy caught it on his helmet when they beat
the Tyree catch.
Yeah. So there you go. I'm going to pull up our footage here so we can kind of celebrate what Georgia did this season on 11 of its best plays. But the thing that I noticed, and I want you to kind of give context for how we selected these here, but in these 11, this is defense heavy. And in a season that I think most fans are going to remember marked by offense, I think in terms of game-changing plays, it may be surprising to people that 8 of the 11 plays that we're about to feature are defenders.
Yeah, and you think about offense this year for Georgia, it wasn't the humongous dynamic plays. It was just an efficient monster that consistently got chunk plays 10, 20, 30 yards, but not your 50, 60 plus yards where you break 3 tackles and you make an outstanding, just amazing individual play. It was just consistency and efficiency on offense. The outstanding plays, like you said, game-changing plays oftentimes happen on the defensive side of the ball.
And when they were on offense, it was Brock Bowers. I mean, there were more, and I think of a few from McConkey as well, and Kenny McIntosh. I know, I don't know about grading, but I'm saying that when we started thinking about this, I thought of some Kenny McIntosh stuff, some Brock Bowers stuff, Stetson, a couple scrambles, but Brock Bowers is otherworldly in some of the things that he did, and this is the tipped ball to himself against Florida.
I mean, what's amazing about this is that this is completely him. This is just him being a phenomenal athlete, vision, tipping the ball, and then obviously, Gandhi because of his speed and the route itself. But just an amazing individual play. And a ball that, if that's a corner versus a DN, might likely be picked off.
I think it is, well, one, there's Brock Vandagriff celebrating like crazy in the background, which I like pointing out. It is important to note that in a game that's about matchups and one person on another, sometimes the greatest plays happen because of a mistake. If this is 2 hands here instead of just the one from the Florida defender, then this is not able to be a special play for Brock Bowers.
Nope, and
but it is.
Great job by the defender. Like and then it's just randomness and Brock's concentration and then scoring. So,
I mean, luck and talent, right? Whatever the saying is on that.
Yes.
He has. I think when this happened on the watch along show with Jim Donnan, I said that guy doesn't need the luck too. Like he has everything else. But he found it there. There was one other Brock Bowers play to be featured. It was against South Carolina. I think a lot of people will remember it.
And you think about this. This is because of the after the catch ability. Like right before he was touched, there's no way on earth he should score a touchdown on this play. And he makes one guy miss and then puts his foot in the ground to the other guy and then just, hits the nitrous and is gone.
Because like if I stop this right here and I told you this is a touchdown, you're like, how? How did that happen?
And what's amazing about it is, like last year against Georgia Tech, or not last year, but 2 seasons ago against Georgia Tech, catching the ball, it was just sheer speed. He just outran all the defenders. This was making a guy miss, being physical, not coming down, not going down easy, then foot in the ground, then speed. And you get to watch him in Athens for what Georgia fans hope is another 15 games next year.
Jim Donnan said, I hope they put him in bubble wrap until August.
I mean, you think
one
about
other thing
it.
to point out, though, is you talk about this all the time, what motion does in the offense, and even having Dayne Edwards just come out here as a motion man and what this opens up because of the stutter step that it takes from some of these South Carolina defenders. I think that's a special element of this. But the other thing, I mean, the second that Brock Bowers gets right here, it's over. The effort, though, one good, one bad. Here, Dylan Bell's still looking for the ball. He's going to make sure he doesn't get the penalty in downfield blocking, which I guess that's better than the alternative. But
yeah, and then
turns around.
I think Ladd comes in and gets in the way.
He says, "No, sir, not me. I am not going to be the one to get the penalty here." But then Ladd just kind of making sure he runs to cut them off as a screener in basketball. This is beautiful what he does here, because there's no way he's going to get a penalty, but he gives just a little extra beat to make sure that there's not a shoestring tackle.
Yep. And that's,
McConkey's so good.
You see with long plays is efforts like that lead to, it's unless it's a coverage breakdown or a true one-on-one situation, plays like this, they happen because of outstanding efforts by individuals like Ladd doing this and getting downfield and getting in people's way.
One theme of this is players, like the plays that we're highlighting here, is players not quitting and playing until the end of a play. Because if I stop here and show you what McConkey's route was, which I believe it was just a in-cut route here, kind of a deep slant, but yeah, there he goes, slants inside. He slows down here. He begins to pull up, but then he like speeds up again, and obviously catches up after the broken tackle. And I mean, that's a special effort there. So it takes both of those things for this to happen. Could Bowers have run without McConkey there? Probably, but it sure helped to have a little bit of extra space.
Two big guys from two big plays from a special player.
Now, let's get to some defense stuff. Way back when, Georgia and Oregon.
This was Chris Smith's highest graded play of the season. And if you look at it, it's brains as much as it is ability, and seeing, not falling for the fake, staying where his eyes, not falling for the action outside, staying where his eyes need to be, reading the route, jumping the route, and then finding the football. Phenomenal work from him.
Back-to-back years, they did this too. I mean, this was very similar to the Clemson interception from the year prior. Oh, Bo Nix. You have to see him.
Or as he's affectionately referred to on the vent as Bo Picks.
Will Georgia see Bo Picks next season? I doubt it. I don't see Oregon making the playoff, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he's back.
There's
a chance. So are they.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Yes. This is one that I think people remember. Yep. An iconic image forever for this season. But when you think about from the grading aspect, it's how, and this is what's amazing when you watch him, and obviously we're talking about Jalen Carter, on a play-by-play basis, he makes offensive linemen look ridiculous so consistently, where they just, the quickness plus the strength and power, it's unparalleled. And it's the reason, you've seen him in mocks at the top of the draft. And I think it's the reason he's going to be the first non-quarterback taken. He's so unique and quick. And then obviously we finish this one with a little flurry.
Which is the thumbnail for this YouTube video, as could only be expected. When he did this,
good choice. Very good choice.
The joke I made on Twitter was, you know how like when people catch a big fish and they do that little like cheeky pose with it? Like, this is what I thought here. But like Jaden Daniels is just like chilling there. I guess he has no other choice at that point. He's not like squirming to get down. He's just like, hey man, when you're done, just, I'll be right here.
Pick you up with 2, hold you with 1. Good night.
Let's go to the national championship. More defensive back play.
And, this guy showed up a lot in terms of Film Don't Lie this past season. And there's a reason. And we talked about it. I think we mentioned it when we did FDO after the game, that he ended up being the highest graded star that Georgia's had since Kirby's been there. The nickel position, that inside defensive back. And this one, he breaks. It's as much about his own effort, because this is breaking on the ball, speed, and then concentration to make a pick. Phenomenal play, phenomenal game that he had in this game, and just overall outstanding season, and one of your defensive leaders coming back in 23.
I'm glad you pointed that out about Georgia's best star under Kirby once again. And we've talked about it before, but when you think about some of the players, and there's been some good ones, I'm not trying to disparage the Mark Webbs of the world, but it seems like, whether it's Webb or if it's Breeny, they've tended to be really good run defenders with some pass defending struggles. And I would say even at the beginning of the season, Bullard had a little bit of that in him, but he just kind of kept getting better and better and better with his pass coverage, and he's relentless. He's a good tackler, and so to me, his fight is what makes him the most well-rounded of those players at Star. And George is fortunate to have him back for another season.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I saw this question on Twitter once, and I commented on it, but basically, what would someone like Kirby Smart want the most from his defense? And basically the answer to the question was an elite person at this position. And when you have a special player at that position, it allows you to do so many different things. I mean, you see how they use him, how physical he is in the run game, like any sort of outside plays oftentimes are shut down, any bubble type stuff. You see him used as a blitzer against Tennessee, like things like that. And those were some of his other highest graded plays. But this one was tops on the list for Mr. Bullard.
Well, and this player in particular, a star player in Georgia's defense, does not live in a vacuum. Like, one reason that he became what he was is because of what Ringo was at his position, or what the inside linebackers were, Lismon London and Dumas Johnson. Like, that all works in cohesion for him to be able to develop like this. And look, if Georgia's corners aren't quite as good, then Bullard's not going to have as many chances, right? So this all works together. Ohio State.
And what's amazing about this play is you don't see the person who makes this play for a long time.
Yeah.
And if I'm an NFL team and I have a 6'2", 200-ish, 205, 100-pound guy who's probably going to run 4.35 at least in the 40, who's, to me, his two most memorable plays in college. Like, I realized the pick sixes, to end the national championship is forever in Georgia lore. But when I think about him, the two most important plays, or two plays that I will think about most, are this one and the one last season against Alabama where he chased down Cameron Latu after he got by him in coverage. Those two plays.
Again, this is just effort following the play. That's a theme of the highest graded plays that Georgia had this season. You'll see it again with Malachi Starks in a moment. We have one more with Ringo. And I think this is right up there with the most memorable plays, because this was clutch for Georgia.
And this was the ultimate teaching tape. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit after the Tennessee game, but this is teaching tape level coverage in terms of press, inside arm, pushing to the outside, find the ball, lean against the defender, make sure the defender can't get back into play, and then make a play on the ball, make the pick.
I'm with you. If I see these two plays and I see what he's going to do in combine stats, and I know the other warts in his game, but if I'm an NFL coach, I have to think I can figure that part out. Like, he's got all the stuff I can't teach. I can teach the other stuff.
And the effort part, work ethic part, like that being very high. What was the term that Daniel Jeremiah used he talked about on the podcast, like Red Star players or something like that?
Yeah,
maybe?
that's what with the Ravens they used
with N'Kobe. Yeah, with N'Kobe, I think is what he was talked about with that. But were this sort of high character, high work ethic, all the intangible parts that you want? That's this guy.
Speaking of Malachi Starks and chasing down a play.
Now, full disclosure, this one is not quite to the level that we're talking about with the other 10, but it's too good not to include.
It saved Georgia 4 points.
You got to have it. Yes.
All right, maybe the better way to say this is that this effort cost Missouri 4 points.
Yes, I think that's the best way to put it. And I've been rewatching this game over the last 2 or 3 days, offense first. But it's like, because I get this question a lot, how was this a game? And it's basically a game because of like 5 plays. A couple fumbles and some bigger, scramble type plays from Missouri. And that was why it was a game. But this one was a big one.
Starks has all the making of a future first round pick if he can stay healthy and develop some of his coverage skills. Everything else is there.
I will double stamp that.
I mean, just, like we saw him get beat a couple times in coverage this year, so he has a lot to learn. But he's at a really good spot to do that, and he's going to start for 2 more seasons at Georgia, and then I don't think he'll be here after that. Back to the Oregon game.
And this is where he announced himself and said, hey, guess what? I'm going to be pretty stinking good, because this was just being an athlete and making a great play. It's even more impressive when you look at it, in the sort of the wide angle, because of how he covered the ball, adjusted his body, all of the above. Just a great play. I mean, what's amazing, you think about back to the Oregon game, they were moving the football. Georgia just turned them over. We saw the Chris Smith one earlier, and then this one, and then the onslaught of offense that was Stetson Bennett in that game when the rest of the crew, it ended it quickly.
When you go through like the Madden video game ratings for players, like agility is always one of those, and that can kind of be one of those terms that gets tossed around, you not know what it means. If I had to define it here for Malachi Starks, it's ability to stay fast and quick while changing directions and not like losing balance. Like it's all those things combined for agility, because like he's moving quickly and his body's turning all over the place, but in a controlled manner. And that's hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. And then they catch a football after that. I mean,
yeah, the concentration to catch the ball.
That.
That's the biggest thing. Yeah, the concentration to catch the ball. Like that's ending it with that makes it what we're talking about for these level of plays.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to forget that one for a long time. This is one I did not remember, frankly. I had to go back and watch this one against Kent State. And this may be another one of those games that people wonder, well, how was that one so close for a little while?
Turnovers. Ladd just had a bad day, honestly. I mean, muff, couple drops, fumble. Like, he had a bad day. But I think it was one of those ones where you got to show Nolan's best play. Like, there was a lot of choices within what we did here. And a lot of Nolan's action oftentimes from a grading perspective ends up in the run game. But this is one where NFL teams are going to look at this and be like, okay, he can be a free rusher, use his hands, bend, and then finish on the edge. And I think you didn't really get to see a lot of that from him, where it's just true let him be free pass rusher. And when he was, obviously, yes, Kent State, but still, you got to have the ability and you got to be able to do these things. And he showed it in this play, and then in quite a few others as well.
So where Daniel Jeremiah kind of compared him, if you did a comp, to Hassan Reddick, and I could kind of see it. I mean, it's not a bad comparison.
It's not a bad one, especially because he's had a lot of recent success. But he's such an elite run defender. That's what's going, like, his floor is a great player for your defense because of him as a run defender. And then you can, scheme up and I think he can become a great pass rusher. He's not quite there yet, but I think speaking of Reddick, like, I think that's, if you look at fit, him at 31 or 30, 30, whatever, 31, whatever the Eagles are, because of the forfeited pick, at the bottom half of the first round, that to me is like perfect fit for him, and especially how they build their team and how they draft.
We'll play that game later on. If this guy feels like a blank, and
that will be fun.
Darnell Washington feels like all of them. Not a lot of offense, but we do have Stetson Bennett with just a really strong throw.
I mean, I remember when we talked about this with FTL, because we looked at the little look of the head to make sure that that the safety was doing what he wanted to before he released this ball. And what's amazing about this throw is this wasn't a hitch up and really step into it and chuck it. He's actually going backwards, plants, and throws it. And I'm pretty sure it goes right around like 56 yards in the air. It's really close to that, if not.
I mean, this is one of those that he's going to have high on his tape to be like, yeah, I can make all the throws.
Because there's no forward lean there. There's no drive into that throw. That's just lean back, push off the back foot, and flick the wrist. And
I remember
50-something yards on the dot.
In watching this game, I remember that CBS had like the cutaway of the offensive players trotting on the field or whatever. And you saw Arian Smith as one of those players. And I looked at Roddy was beside me at the watch along. And I said, I think I know what's coming here. Because you're not putting Arian Smith to block, I'll tell you that. And so they had kind of set this up beforehand to take the shot. And this was just perfect. And I think at this point is when it really felt like in Georgia and Tennessee, yeah, Georgia's really in command of this game. And it felt like Georgia could do virtually no wrong against a Tennessee team that had a lot of both.
Yep. Also, Mr. Willock with a good block on the pull there.
There we go. That's 11 football plays, showing off some of the best of Georgia's season. When you look at, look, this is not saying that those are Georgia's best players of the season or the others that weren't featured. I mean, you can even see on here's Darnell Washington also doing a really good job blocking on this play. And I think Darnell Washington is one of Georgia's best 5 players from this last season. But how does that manifest itself into PFF grades?
And that's what we want to show. I think we did a good job of that. And I think the key here is that, like, when you look at positive grades, not, positive and negative, from a positive standpoint, Georgia, I think, was 8th in the Power 5 with sort of the first degradation of that line, the 0.5 percentage of positive plays, 5th in the Power 5 in the next one, and then 6th in the Power 5 in this one. So up there in terms of, and I think Jalen Carter, by the way, had the most positive in terms of positive grade percentage, was the highest in the nation on defense. So consistency. Now, was it 2021 in terms of especially the defensive side of the ball? It wasn't. I think if you go back and those numbers are even higher, they're top 1 or 2 for the most part in all those, especially defensively. But they play well, and these are just some of the ones that get that next step in terms of the grading process.
Who are some of the names of returnees, so players that are coming back to Georgia for 2023 that you saw kind of pop up a lot in this? I know we talked about Brock Bowers. Obviously. We talked about Malachi Starks. Bear Alexander, I think, was one you said that you saw.
Yep. Bear Alexander. Michael Williams was one of the ones who had a couple of sort of at this level. Ingram Dawkins, Bullard, Dumas Johnson, and I think there's one more. Ladd and Ladd McConkey. So. Yeah,
and I can think of something off the top of my head that, like, I could think that Smile Munden had a few efforts that were borderline close on that. And It's like you were saying, like that scale that we started off with, I think it's important to note most of these end up being kind of neutral in 0. And especially a game like a Georgia and Ohio State, that's when the players that really make those outstanding plays can elevate a team to a special season.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Because a lot of times the circumstances don't necessarily dictate that, hey, when Georgia's playing Ball State, they may have worse grades in that game than they do in an SEC championship. Like, that happens. Like, the opponent dictates the effort sometimes.
Yes. And also it's a lot of, I think the biggest thing to really, that folks, when they look at grades, 2 things. One, especially early in the season, it's an execution type deal. It always is. But early in the season, let it happen. Don't overreact to one number. Don't overreact to a 72 or an 84 or something like that. As you get to the later in the season, because I think that's where the key and that's where the numbers manifest themselves out, where you see consistency over time. That's when I start really paying attention to the grades. The biggest thing for me, though, even I'm a part of this process and I understand this process as much as anyone, but I don't really get lost in 75 versus 78. I don't really care that much because I know, and I go and I watch and I understand, the number itself. Now, 85, 86 versus 60, yes, that's going to catch your eye. But, 81 versus 79, who cares? It's a different color.
Well, we both said manifest one time in this, and I trashed Ball State, not intending to, which is a great sign that we need to wrap this episode of Film Not Live from UGAsports.com. Coming up later on in the off season, we'll be doing a little bit of NFL draft talk, I'm sure. We have a great series that we're working on about Football 101. We want to kind of show you some of the basic concepts that Georgia does and maybe some personnel groupings. And we did this in a written version over on the Dogman at UGAsports.com. We want to bring some more video elements and add to that too. So that will be upcoming later in this offseason. And in short order, we will be having spring football to discuss and the NFL draft to discuss and combine stuff, which, Brent, you're a stats nerd. And I mean that lovingly. Like, your brain works differently than mine. You're just a smarter human than I am. There is nothing that you nerd out about more than NFL draft.
Yes,
and so I'm almost as excited to watch you watch this happen with some of these players, because what you were saying about Keely Ringo, like, that burns within you of like, why are people dissing this guy with this talent? Because if I'm a football coach, I need that.
I can work with the other things. I'm taking
Yes.
him. Now, is he going to be the top 15, top 10 that we maybe thought? No, but he's a first-round pick, period. End of story.
There you go. There's your preview for what's coming up. We're going to manifest the end of this episode. And thanks for watching Film Don't Lie.